Good evening everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. So today is 3rd July 2025 and today we have some very important topics for the discussion. So one by one we'll try to discuss all these important topics in a very detailed and in-depth manner so that this discussion will be helpful for your examination. And in fact, the PDF of this presentation has been given in the description section. So you can directly access the PDF of this particular class. So without any further delay, let's get into the discussion and let's understand few topics in a very detailed manner. And the first topic that has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and this is important for your general studies paper 3. And this could be important for general studies paper 1 and paper 2 as well indirectly. So therefore gig workers as a very important concept that has been developing in India. And in fact gig workers or the gig working system is actually having a huge potential in India. Now in this context we will be understanding, are these gig workers part of India's large labor data? And if they are not part of data, how we need to include them as part of labor data, and how can we have most accurate data about the gig workers? So all these things we'll be discussing in a very detailed manner. And if you look at the context of this particular topic, the context is that India's labor survey, which is periodic labor force participation survey, and this periodic labor force participation survey has recently come under scrutiny. So why it has come under scrutiny? Because it failed to adequately capture the gig workers and platform workforce. In fact, the periodic labor force participation survey failed to take into account the data with respect to the gig and platform workers. Right? So despite there is a policy level recognition for gig workers and welfare initiatives that have been already launched by the central government and various state governments, the periodic labor force participation survey failed to adequately capture the gig and platform workforce data. And in fact, if we can actually look at the gig workers and platform workers, majority of the workforce have been concentrated in retail trade and sales, followed by transportation, finance, insurance, manufacturing and education. And this is some important data with respect to gig workforce in India. And in fact, in India, there are a number of attempts to recognize the growing gig workforce or the platform workers. In fact, India's workforce has undergone a structural transformation. A structural transformation specifically, earlier the gig workforce may not have adequate social security or social safety nets, but now there is an increasing demand from various quarters to make sure that this gig workers or the platform workers should be considered as part of the formal workforce. And in fact, in recent times, there is a substantial rise in gig workers and platform-based employment in India. From food delivery, ride hailing to digital freelancing and even home services. So in all these areas, we can actually see a mushrooming gig workers or the platform workforce. And a new generation of workers are operating outside the traditional employment framework as well. According to some data from the Niti Aayog, which has been published in the year 2022, gig workforce is projected to grow to around 23.5 million by the year 29 and 30. And in fact, there is a large scale potential that the gig workforce would substantially increase in the coming years because of the structural changes that the economy has been observing or experiencing. So recognizing this transformation or this shift that has been taking place in 2025 union budget, it has extended some social protection measures for the gig workers as well. And in fact, like any other workforce, social security, social safety nets must be extended to the gig workers as well. They have to be adequately recognized with the social safety nets. However, country's primary labor statistics source the periodic labor force participation survey. So this periodic labor force participation survey essentially provides countries' primary labor statistics. So it still fails to appropriately reflect this emerging segment. And in fact, it clearly says that there is a structural transformation that has been taking place, and there is a substantial increase in the gig workforce or platform workforce. Despite all these changes, the periodic labor force participation survey is failed to capture the data about the gig workers and the platform workers. Now we'll understand what are the limitations of the periodic labor force participation survey. And in fact, the periodic labor force participation survey is released by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. And in fact, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation recently clarified in the Parliament that all economic activities, so they are defined as activities which are performed for pay or profit, and they will be included in the periodic labor force participation survey. However, no specific changes have been made to identify the gig workers separately. So this is what the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation has recently clarified its stand on the Parliament, in the Parliament, right? So it has said that all economic activities, so they will be defined either activities performed for pay or profit. Right? So these are the activities which would be considered as the economic activities. But the gig workers or the gig workforce are not separately identified as part of the economic activities. So this is what the stand of the Ministry of Statistics and the Program Implementation. So this essentially means that the platform workforce or the gig workers are captured under a very broad and a vague classification, that is a self-employed or own account workers or the just casual laborers, right? So in fact, all these different categories would come under part of a broad and a vague classification. And as a result, key aspects of the gig work such as multiple app-based employment, dependence on platform algorithms, income volatility, and even absence of employment contracts remain unreported as part of the periodic labor force participation survey. And it is very important that the data with respect to the periodic labor force, data with respect to the gig workers must be calculated as part of the periodic labor force participation survey, so that it will result in evidence-based and data-driven policy making, and it will also benefit the gig workers who are working on a large scale, including the women as well. However, the statistical invisibility that has been shown by the periodic labor force participation survey when it comes to calculating the gig workers, it not only underrepresents the scale of gig work, but it also hinders the equitable access to welfare and the social protection as well. However, the existing periodic labor force participation design, it does not differentiate between a traditional shopkeeper and a food delivery agent. So in fact, it has been operating across, so these food delivery platform workers who have been working with various platforms like Zomato and Swiggy, but the problem is that the periodic labor force participation survey has not made any proper differentiation between these two different categories of workers. And in fact, both may be classified under the self-employed category, even though their work conditions, income sources, risk exposure, they vary significantly. So this essentially means that the periodic labor force participation survey has been capturing the gig workers into the overall economic activity, which is very broad and very vague. There should be a specific data which must be related to the gig workers and the platform workers, so that we will understand, we will identify the working conditions, whether they are getting social security benefits, social safety nets, and ultimately it will result in evidence-based and data-driven policy making. However, certain measures have been already taken for the benefit or for the welfare of the gig workers. So in recent years, there are number of government initiatives such as e-Shram registration, digital ID issuance, and even inclusion of Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which is a health insurance scheme. Under this particular scheme, a 5 lakh rupees of health insurance would be provided to every household. And all these benefits have been extended to the gig workers and the platform workers so that they will be covered under the formal safety net. However, without the parallel updates in the labor statistics, it becomes very difficult to measure the overall impact and also monitor delivery and even identify the excluded beneficiaries. So therefore, there is a need to update the labor statistics, and there is a need to separately calculate the gig workforce as part of the periodic labor force participation survey, so that we will understand everything with respect to the gig workers. However, in the year 2025, the periodic labor force participation survey has introduced some improvements such as large sample sizes, monthly estimates, and even expanded rural coverage. But still, it fails to address some core issues which are existed, such as lack of dedicated category for the gig and platform based workers. However, there are some top reasons for working in the gig economy. What are those reasons why people have been preferring to work in the gig economy? Because it is it is more flexible in nature, right? So earning while seeking a better job, and it is autonomous, it is flexible, and it is in our control, and balancing career and family needs, and only way to make an income and make extra money on the side, right? So you can also do the freelancing work while you are a student, while you are already employed in another company. So therefore it is flexible, it is autonomous, and you have the control over whatever work that you do. Because of this reason, most of the people have been preferred to engage in the gig worker, engage as a gig workers, and mostly women, and it will also result in women empowerment by making women financially independent. The next important topic is custodial deaths in India. So recently a case has been in news, which is a person named Ajit Kumar, who belonged to a Sivaganga district of Tamil Nadu. So he was brutally assaulted by the police in custody, and later it led to his death, right? So therefore we look into the custodial deaths and the scenario in India, and this is very important for your gender studies paper 2. So let's have a look at this. Now, what is the context? The context is that recently a Madurai bench of Madras High Court condemned custodial torture of Ajit Kumar, and this custodial torture of Ajit Kumar later led to his death. And the Madurai bench of Madras High Court also called this as a more brutal than a murder. And in fact, it is even considered as a murder because he died in the custody because of the police brutality. Now, what is a custodial death? So we'll be understanding the definition of custodial death. So many of you have already acquainted with this term, custodial death. So this custodial death, in a very simple term, it refers to a death of a person while in a police, judicial or military custody. So this is the custodial death, right? So I am repeating this again. The custodial death is a death of a person while in a police, judicial or a military custody, before trial, during the trial, or even after the conviction. So this is what is called as a custodial death. And in fact, the custodial death will include both natural causes such as illness and even the unnatural causes such as torture, assault and negligence. In Ajit Kumar's case, it is torture and assault on him, and later it led to his death. Now, if you look at the statistics of custodial death in India, so according to National Human Rights Commission 2122. So 2150 deaths in judicial custody and 155 in police custody, and only 21 saw in disciplinary action. So therefore a very less number of individuals were held guilty, right? So very less number of person, disciplinary action was taken on very less number of people, despite a huge number of custodial deaths have took place. According to National Crime Records Bureau 2000 to 2020, 1888 deaths were reported and only 26 convictions, despite 893 cases have been filed against the police for their brutality and their assault. And in between 2017 and 22, 345 judicial inquiries have been conducted and 123 arrests have been made and 79 charge sheets have been filed, but 0 convictions. So you can see that inherently the system has been supporting the custodial deaths, and the system itself protecting people who have been doing this severe torture, assault on the under trials or the convicted individuals. And in Tamil Nadu itself, during 2016 to 22, 490 deaths have been took place. And in fact, Tamil Nadu tops the entire South India in custodial deaths. So you can imagine the plight of the situation in Tamil Nadu. And in fact, there are a number of cases of the custodial deaths, and the recent ones including the Satan Kulam case 2020 Tamil Nadu. A father-son duo, Jairaj and Benix, they have died after police torture, and it has triggered a national outrage and arrest of people who have conducted this, who are responsible for this. And apart from that, in Tamil Nadu itself, in the year 2023, Ambasamudram case, an IPS officer allegedly tortured youth and suspended after media exposed the abuse. And Sheikh Shadat case in the year 2023 Delhi, so he was died in a custody and an FIR has been filed after video and postmortem confirmed a foul play. And in the year 2024, Guna, Madhya Pradesh, a tribal youth case also came to the limelight. So Pardi youth died in a custody on a wedding day and sparked a statewide protest as well. And Somnath Suryavanshi case 2024 Maharashtra, so a law student died in a judicial custody. Bombay High Court ordered a special investigation team probe on this matter. And Narinder Deep Singh case 2025 Punjab, so he died in a lockup and family has alleged torture, assault on that particular individual, and CBI probe has also been demanded. And the last one is Ajit Kumar's case 2025 in Tamil Nadu. A temple guard, Ajit Kumar, who died after police beating, and CBI probe has been ordered by the Chief Minister. So therefore, when you are writing any answer on the custodial deaths, so you can mention these cases as examples to further enrich your answer. Now, what are the reasons for the custodial deaths in India? There are a number of reasons for the custodial deaths in India. So firstly, we don't have a anti-torture law, because India has signed but India has not ratified UN Convention Against Torture. So if India ratified UN Convention Against Torture, we would have anti-torture law. And apart from that, we don't have any stand-alone anti-torture legislation in India as well, and that is one of the major reasons for increasing custodial deaths in India. However, the Law Commission in its 273 report has recommended that India should have an anti-torture legislation, right? So that the custodial deaths, the number of custodial deaths might be reduced. And in fact, there is also an opaque investigation process that has been taking place. And in fact, police themselves destroy the evidence and they even manipulate the records, and conviction is very rare. Example, in Ajit's case, post-mortem shifted and even the CCTV footage is also missing. And in fact, it is important to note that Chief Minister M.K. Stalin has ordered the CBI probe into this matter. And if you look at the prisons in India, most of these prisons are overcrowded and understaffed. And in fact, prisoners are also receiving poor medical care, and they also face the mental health neglect and high stress, and this very often leads to suicide and illness among the prisoners. And in fact, it is also very important that SCs make up around 38.5% of the preventive detainees in Tamil Nadu, despite forming only just 20% of the population. So therefore, they are very often targeting the marginalized groups because they are financially backward, socially backward. So because of that reason, the authorities or the hierarchy has been very often targeting the marginalized groups. And there is also a weak internal accountability as well, because arrests without FIR are very common, and unofficial detentions by the police personnel and even the cover-ups are very common practices in the lower ranks at several police stations in different states. So these are the main reasons for the custodial deaths in India. However, there are some important judicial pronouncements from the Supreme Court about the custodial torture or the custodial death. And in DK Basu versus State of West Bengal, and this is a very important judgment from the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has laid down 11 important guidelines for arrest and detention. And in fact, so the Supreme Court has also laid down guidelines for the mandatory medical checkups and arrest memo as well. And in Nilapati Behera versus State of Odisha case 1993, compensation has been awarded to the victim's family, and it was held responsible under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution that talks about right to life and personal liberty. And People's Union for Civil Liberties versus Union of India case 2005, the Supreme Court has directed for the installation of CCTVs in lockups for more and more transparency. However, several police stations or several states have not properly implemented this judgment of the Supreme Court. So that means the lockups does not have the CCTV cameras. And in fact, in a review of custodial death in the year 2020, the Supreme Court has actually asked all the states to file a compliance reports on the CCTV installation. Because in People's Union for Civil Liberties versus Union of India case 2005, the Supreme Court has asked all the states to install CCTV cameras in lockups for more transparency. And in fact, you can also see there are number of states with highest custodial deaths. And in the financial year 21-22, Maharashtra has seen the highest custodial deaths, followed by Gujarat and Bihar. Right? So these are the top states where there are highest number of custodial deaths in different years. And what should be the way forward, and how can we address this problem of increasing incidence of custodial torture, assault, and even deaths? So immediately, India should have an anti-torture legislation. So in order to do so, there is a need to enact a specific law defining custodial torture and even mandating a time-bound trials. And in fact, there is a need for an independent oversight. For that, we need to strengthen the National Human Rights Commission with suo motu powers, mandatory reporting, and follow-up on the police abuse cases as well. Right? So therefore, there is a need for an independent oversight. And we need to bring legal and procedural reforms to meet the international human rights standards. However, it is unfortunate that in India, we don't follow the international human rights standards. So, in fact, in one of its judgment, that is People's Union for Civil Liberties and Union of India 2015, the Supreme Court has asked the states to install CCTVs in all the lockups. So therefore, we need to have a strengthened forensic and CCTV evidence. And for that, we need to use a tech-enabled tracking such as body cams, which is very often used in the Western countries, and the digital case logs as well, because it will reduce the evidence tampering. and there is also a need for the police reforms as well. In India, police reforms are long pending, so we need to inculcate professionalism into Indian police. So for that, we need to implement Supreme Court's Prakash Singh guidelines for fixed tenure, separate investigation, and the law and order duties. And it is also important to enforce SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act and during detention and even the custodial procedures as well. And there is a need to establish fast track courts as well, and we need to set up a special benches for the custodial death trials to ensure timely justice and deterrence, so that such incidents of custodial deaths, assault will not takes place. And in fact, the police will also respect the human rights as well, right? So I hope you have understood this topic, and that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. And if you like our lecture, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.